We've been talking about Phase 6 for a few videos now, especially about Spider-Man, Brand New Day and Avengers, Doomsday. And honestly, even though I love theorizing and trying to guess who this Doom is, a Stark, a variant, or whatever, I have to admit I think it's time to leave them alone for a bit, at least in videos. There's new information coming out every day and we'll do an update in a few weeks, I promise. Because Doomsday is taking up so much space that we almost forget about everything else. Notably, Secret Wars will revive a 20-year-old connected universe. A famous soft reboot that could finally give some fresh air to this whole universe, which, let's be honest, is getting a bit suffocating. And honestly, that's what I truly hope for. Because today, it's almost impossible for a newcomer to catch up on everything. It's longer than watching the entire Game of Thrones series with its 70 hours or even Friends with its 88 hours. So, a new entry point is needed. A moment when every new viewer can say, well, I don't need to watch 50 movies, I understood everything from the very first one. Because Marvel, at its core, was about movies to watch with the family. 15 years ago, parents could take their kids to see Avengers and share in the adventure. Today, that same kid who grew up can hardly say to his own son, well son, we're going on a 3-month marathon. So the fan base, well, it's stagnating. Or worse, it's shrinking. But don't worry, Kevin Feige said it, the MCU is made to last 100 years. Yeah, well, not everyone is excited about that. But one thing is certain, this new era is going to mark one of the most exciting sagas Marvel has ever told. Because now, and for the first time in its history, Marvel owns the rights to 100 of its characters, yes, all of them, to tell these stories in its expanded universe. And so, making movies where the X-Men, the Avengers, Ghost Rider, Doctor Strange, the Fantastic Four, and all imaginable heroes will finally be able to interact with each other in almost 100 movies and no longer be limited to just the Avengers. Believe me, with what they've planned, it's gonna be really epic. And Paranormal team, Incredible Galactic War, the birth of mutants, and the return of the original Avengers. Well, in this video, we're mostly going to talk about the future. But just in case, we're entering the spoiler zone, the danger zone. You're with Kevin Buckhart, your favorite Oracle's favorite theorist. Opening credits, it's Kevin Buckhart. Marvel, double or nothing. As I mentioned in the introduction, Secret Wars is going to lead to a reboot. By the way, Phase 6 will serve as a bridge between the old MCU and the new one. It will allow all the newcomers to start from the Fantastic Four movie while understanding that there was a world before. And for those who are tired of it, it will give them a satisfying ending with Secret Wars. But if today, Marvel can afford a reboot, a real one that doesn't look like anything they've done before, it's because only very recently have they finally gotten all their characters back. Unlike DC, for example, which is entirely owned by Warner and has been able to use its entire roster since 1969. Even though, let's be honest, they basically just keep remaking Batman and Superman movies every 10 years. But then, why didn't Marvel own the rights to its own characters? They're still their characters, right? Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. Let me explain in 2 minutes. The 90s saw a huge boom in electronics, video games, and the internet. It was a revolution for the entertainment market, but a disaster for comics. Young people would rather play than read now, and the comic book industry collapses. Marvel then goes through the worst crisis in its history, and to survive, they try absolutely everything. Even Stan Lee tried to buy back Marvel with Michael Jackson. Until they realized that MJ mainly wanted to play Spider-Man in the movies.
He wanted to be Spider-Man, to buy the rights to Spider-Man. I think he wanted to play the role of Peter Parker.
In the end, Marvel decided to sell the film rights to its main characters to different studios for just a few million. Practically nothing, but enough to get through the crisis. And each contract had a clause. If a character wasn't used after a certain number of years, Marvel could get them back. It all started with Blue Line Cinema, which bought the rights to Iron Man and Blade. And as you know, Blade was the first to come out and it was a huge hit. A trilogy was launched and made over $200 million at the time, which is pretty good. Iron Man, on the other hand, was set aside. And just like Blade, he later returned to Marvel's fold. For its part, Lionsgate acquired the rights to Punisher, Black Widow, and Man-Thing, and they didn't do much with them. A Punisher movie with John Travolta in 2004 and a lousy TV movie about Man-Thing in 2005. In short, they too eventually ended up back at Marvel. Universal, on their side, got their hands on Namor and Hulk. The deal was later renegotiated. Marvel got Namor back, but didn't fully get Hulk back. Because Universal kept the distribution rights. That's actually why we've never had any other solo Hulk movies since Disney bought Marvel. It's still a bit of a murky situation today. But since Marvel was able to make a She-Hulk series, and the rumors about a World War Hulk movie are getting stronger, we can imagine that this problem is finally resolved. You should also know that a studio doesn't just buy a character, they buy the whole universe that comes with it, and now we're getting to the big players, Fox and Sony. Fox, which Disney bought in 2019 for the modest sum of $52 billion with the X-Men and the Fantastic Four included in the deal. Daredevil had already returned to Marvel earlier, since Fox hadn't done anything with him since the first movie. And of course Sony, who squeezes every last drop they can out of Spider-Man. They, on the other hand, are extremely careful never to lose the rights, because their Spidey movies are simply the biggest hits of the smallest studio in Hollywood. But today, things are different. Marvel seems to have gotten everyone back. And they even found a good deal with Sony for Spider-Man, because with the failure of its Sony Spider-Man universe, it's Spider-Man, remember? Sony has loosened its grip a bit. Production of the Spider-Man series, especially Spider-Noir, has been fully delegated to Prime Video, where it's now in development. And you have to understand that while the general public got to know the MCU through the Avengers at the time, these characters were almost secondary in the comics. The real stars were the X-Men, Spider-Man, and the Fantastic Four. The Avengers were a conservative super soldier, an alcoholic inventor, a Russian spy, an archer, a Shakespearean Norse god, and a green colossus. Back then, the team was pretty ridiculous compared to the mutants, so it's almost a miracle Iron Man was such a hit. And even worse, that he became so iconic that he launched the entire MCU. And so today, after making billions with second-rate characters, Marvel now has an army of iconic characters, a huge catalog, some experience, resources, and a narrative potential 100 times greater than when it all began. So the question now is how to get things going again when possibly no one seems to care anymore. Secret Wars? The necessary reboot. We know something isn't right. There's a kind of superhero fatigue or Marvel fatigue or whatever you prefer to call it. It's clear people haven't gone out to see a Marvel movie like they used to in a long time. Back then, it was a huge sensation, yet now millions spend 5 hours watching a live stream for a casting announcement of a movie releasing in 2 years. Or worse, a Madame Web that becomes a worldwide hit as soon as it comes out, on Netflix. In short, today's market is a bit complicated to analyze. Maybe even, like in the 90s with the comic book crisis, the flood of content has ended up overwhelming the audience. But the crisis of the 90s isn't the only crisis Marvel Comics has had to face in recent years. Another crisis could also help explain what's happening now. In the 2000s, Marvel Comics tried to renew itself. They wanted to breathe new life into their series. The Avengers disappeared, replaced by the Young Avengers and the New Avengers. Steve Rogers dies in 2007, replaced first by Bucky and then by Falcon. In the X-Men, Charles Xavier is no longer leading the school for gifted youngsters, and the mutant teams are split into multiple titles. Spider-Man, on the other hand, goes through a reboot after Civil War, which leads many fans to prefer his Ultimate version. And the Fantastic Four are completely sidelined after Secret Wars to avoid giving more exposure to a team that at the time belonged to Fox. In short, Marvel shelves its biggest stars to try to launch a new generation of heroes. Although this decision brings some pleasant surprises, the public isn't convinced. People stay loyal to the characters they've grown up with. That's actually what makes DC strong, or sometimes weak. They bet everything on their big three, well, big five, but it's always worked. So why change a winning formula? At Marvel, it's a strategy that didn't work in comics, but was still tried in the movies. By killing off or changing the most popular Avengers, Marvel also lost part of its audience. You know them. Those who say the MCU has been dead since Endgame. And in the end, the multiverse saga looks a lot like that phase from the 2000s in the comics. Projects that try to recreate the original era with substitute Avengers without ever really succeeding. Because yes, people certainly love Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, but above all, they love Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. And it's for the same reasons that we keep going to see all the new versions of Batman, no matter who the actor is. Marvel, buoyed by the success of Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy, who, remember, were once ignored in the comics, thought they could repeat the miracle. But that era is over. And today people want something big or nothing at all, and it seems Marvel has finally understood that. Even though, honestly, I think that was already the plan from the beginning with Secret Wars, and that this phase was really just a transition phase. Alright, Doomsday, we've already talked about it. We're starting to get an idea of how it's going to happen, even though everything is still pretty unclear. Secret Wars, on the other hand, should follow a pattern and an ending that's pretty close to the comics. Basically, at the end of the multiverse, we have the rise of God Emperor Doom, who creates Battleworld, a planet made from the most iconic pieces of the Marvel universe. And not just a piece of Vaucluse, a piece of Texas, no. We're talking about things like Spider Island, where everyone is a Spider-Man, or Green World, populated only by Hulks. From the Domain of Apocalypse, which takes up the story of Age of Apocalypse, from Monarchy of M, inspired by the events of House of M, or even Warzone, a world where the Civil War never ended and devastated the United States. One day, I need to make a whole video about this for you because clearly there are some incredible things. On this battle world, everyone thinks Doom is God and that this world has always been this way. Everyone except the passengers of 2 lifeboats. They remember everything and they're going to start a rebellion against Doom. The ending leads to a final showdown, Doom versus Reed Richards, and it's Mr. Fantastic who wins. He then inherits the power to rebuild the multiverse and creates a new 616. Some heroes remember what happened, others don't. But all are given a new life in a soft reboot universe. A universe where dead heroes and villains can reappear and where others from the multiverse can emerge. And that's probably what we'll get in the movies too. The Russo brothers have already said that many characters will die in the Avengers movies, and that this time there won't be an Endgame style resurrection. We're at the end of one era and the start of another. The old X-Men will probably be gone, maybe with the exception of Wolverine, who would be there to prepare the next generation, especially with a new actor who has reportedly already been cast as the new Wolverine. So yes, the MCU X-Men will be different, younger, with promising actors, but we'll talk more about that in a moment. The Fantastic Four, on the other hand, are part of the reboot, so they remain unchanged. According to rumors, Tom Holland has signed on for 6 new appearances as Spider-Man, so he would be around, maybe even passing the torch to Miles Morales, or even expanding with the whole Spider family. And that will also be the case for many other characters who will either be kept, removed, or completely rewritten. But then, what happens to the Avengers in all this? The return of the Avengers? Well, I think 100% of the original cast is on its way out. And honestly, that's pretty normal. It's the end of a cycle. However, I don't think the Avengers are going to disappear. Quite the opposite. Today, it's the most popular brand in the MCU. And I think we've all already dreamed of seeing what this team could be in a world that's 100% Marvel, not just a world where they're the only defenders. So there's a very good chance that a new team will emerge. But be careful, I'm not talking about a team with Sam Wilson or a Red Guardian in the story. No. A team made up of a new Tony Stark, a new Steve Rogers, but also, why not, a real Hank Pym and a real Janet Pym in the roles of Ant-Man and the classic Wasp from the comics. These characters could be multiverse heroes revealed in Secret Wars, a team that could naturally unite in the movie and rejoin the MCU as an obvious choice. We could also add Kate Bishop as Hawkeye because, let's be honest, she's clearly appreciated by the fans, and Hercules to replace Thor. Thor, who is already announced as one of the most significant deaths in the upcoming movies, because there's a good chance that the Asgardians will disappear, starting their cycle of Ragnarok again. So don't panic, they'll come back one day, that's for sure, but not right away. And they could very well be replaced by the Olympians with the introduction of Hercules, but also his brother, the god of war, Ares. As for Hulk, it's high time he made his return in Savage mode, maybe even as an anti-hero, a real threat to this new world, but with a new actor. Now, I love Ruffalo, but he's tired and he's making us tired. Give us a wild and really bitter Bruce Banner. It would be a more open team, with members able to come and go based on the threats. They might have less narrative importance now, but would still protect Earth from future threats. And this time, no Stark Tower, but finally the arrival of the Avengers Mansion, with everything that comes with it. Internal drama, rivalries, superhero-style gossip, in short, everything we love. And above all, it would be a real shame not to have classic Avengers in a world where they could share their scientific knowledge with the Fantastic Four, debate with the mutants over ideological differences, or even fight alongside galactic heroes to defend Earth 616. Yes, the Avengers still have tons of stories to tell. A reboot would honestly help them a lot. But then, what else can we expect after Secret Wars? I'll answer you right away, but before we continue, 65% of you are still watching all my content without subscribing. So yes, we've made good progress, and I thank you for that, but we still have room to grow, my friends. So, if you're one of those 65% and you enjoy what you're watching, what are you waiting for? Come on, I'll give you a few seconds to do it. While we wait for others, drop your name in the comments and give a thumbs up, it really helps. Let's continue. The Mutant Saga. Since acquiring Fox, it's clear Marvel is focusing on the X-Men. For years, rumors have pointed to a third saga, the Mutant Saga. And personally, I think it's really time to evolve this idea of a saga. Sure, it worked really well for the first one, the Infinity Saga, but we shouldn't forget that it was built up gradually. It was a universe in constant evolution leading up to an epic conclusion. But the Multiverse Saga, that's a whole different story. Because deep down, we realized that less than half of the projects actually mention this multiverse. And the rest, well, they're all over the place and hardly open up any real possibilities. The transition from the Infinity Saga to the Multiverse Saga was extremely poorly prepared, and Marvel is still suffering the consequences. Now it's time to think differently. A bit like in comics or even in manga and anime, maybe work with narrative arcs. Arcs that lead to big team-up movies but still keep their own identity. That would be a way to introduce mutants in a smart way without making them the sole focus of an entire saga. For example, the Infinity Saga could have been divided into a Galactic arc with the Guardians, Captain Marvel and Thanos, and an Avengers arc showing the team's rise and fall. Actually, that's basically what happened. In the Multiverse Saga, we could have had a multiversal arc with Loki, Multiverse of Madness, No Way Home, and Deadpool and Wolverine. But no, actually nothing else. I realize that it's so poorly constructed that you can't really bring the rest together. Maybe just a conclusion arc at best, because this saga spent its time wrapping up some characters' stories without really opening new ones. Thor, Ant-Man, Black Panther, Guardians 3. Anyway, let's not get sidetracked. Phase 7 could actually open up new arcs. The Mutant arc, the Supernatural arc, the Galactic arc, and the Street Level arc. Arcs where heroes could move around, but the main directions would stay well defined. And above all, open arcs that don't all need to end together in the same way. On the contrary, each arc would have its own timeline and new arcs could be added over time, creating a truly serialized story. But above all, it would allow everyone to follow what really interests them without feeling like they're missing something if they skip a movie they don't want to see, like Thunderbolts, for example. But let's get back to the Mutant arc. Secret Wars was meant to introduce the MCU's New Mutants. Latest info suggests their first movie could arrive in early 2028, right after Secret Wars. They will be at the heart of this new MCU, and they need to start strong so the hype from Secret Wars doesn't die down. Let's hope we don't get hit by a second pandemic. Knock on wood. The team would focus on the trio Charles Xavier, Jean Grey, and Cyclops. We don't know the full cast yet, but there are persistent rumors about Daisy Edgar Johnson for Jean Grey and Patrick Schwarzenegger for Scott. As for Professor X, it's a bit less clear. There are rumors about a black actor, but in the end, Bryan Cranston seems to be the frontrunner. And personally, I have to admit, I love it. For the rest of the team, Margaret Qualley could play Rogue, Julia Butters as Kitty Pryde, Jesse Plemons as Beast, Trinity Jolly Bliss as Jubilee, and maybe Hunter Schafer as Mystique and Cynthia Erivo as Storm. A cast that's predominantly female for now, but it's definitely impressive, with two young up-and-coming actors. Well, except for Cynthia Erivo, who's not that young anymore. But then, if their movie comes out right after Secret Wars, what should it be about? First of all, we've heard that Kevin Feige, head of Marvel, and Bob Iger, head of Disney, don't agree on how to develop the film. Feige wanted a film grounded in reality, dealing with social themes about what it really means to be a mutant. In short, a socially conscious film centered on the X-Men's main theme in the comics, racism and xenophobia. However, with the results of Thunderbolts, Bob Iger forced Feige to launch this first film as a major cinematic event like the first X-Men movies were. The ideological questions will remain, but more in the background. And according to the latest reports, the villains of this first film would be Mr. Sinister, Senator Kelly, and Bolivar Trask. These names might not mean much to you, but you've likely seen them before without knowing. Mr. Sinister is a main villain in X-Men 97. Nathaniel Essex is a 19th century scientist obsessed with the theory of evolution. He believes mutants will rule humanity within a century. He will therefore begin conducting genetic experiments on humans and then on mutants until he is transformed by Apocalypse, becoming Mr. Sinister. Senator Kelly, whom we see in X-Men 1, is the #1 anti-mutant politician. He is the one who will recruit Bolivar Trask into his Sentinel program, which we notably see in Days of Future Past. Together, they will spend their lives hunting down and persecuting mutants. So, in this new MCU, we can imagine that mutants are something relatively new, a new threat to humanity that could become the scapegoats for what really happened in the Avengers movies. And so, we could see policies being put in place to control or even eliminate them, a climate of tension that could even lead to the end of the mutant arc with a showdown between the X-Men and the Avengers. But let's not forget Deadpool, whom Disney is not going to let slip away like that. Sure, the character is way too crazy to fit into a social storyline, but Ryan Reynolds says he's already working on a new Deadpool project, probably even an X-Force project. We already saw a version of it in Deadpool 2, but the X-Force is actually much fiercer and usually takes on suicide missions. I also think we might see a lot more of Deadpool in the future, because Reynolds himself said he'd like his character to be a cameo character, a mercenary who occasionally crosses paths with other heroes like he does in the comics. We'll have to wait and see. The Paranormal Secret Wars arc is likely to be completely crazy. Many characters will probably make an appearance and most of them won't even come back. But other entities, demons and oddities might take advantage of this event to sneak into this new world, starting with the vampires. The MCU already features some monsters, especially with the Werewolf by Night special. But in general, creatures of the night have always been very discreet in the MCU, and Mahershala Ali's Blade project might finally come to life, opening the gates of hell for us, and with it a whole bunch of creatures that could have slipped into this new MCU. Ghost Rider might also join him, with reports saying he could debut in the next Avengers movie. So we don't know if Nicolas Cage will be back, but everything suggests that Ryan Gosling will play the new Spirit of Vengeance. And when you mention Ghost Rider, you automatically think of Mephisto, a demon everyone has been waiting for since WandaVision and who could very well make an appearance very soon. And we can imagine that he wouldn't be happy to see all those souls leaving hell during the creation of this new universe. All of this could lead us to the highly anticipated Midnight Suns movie. Blade and Ghost Rider team up with misfits to stop powerful demons from causing chaos on Earth. And when you've read some of Marvel's darkest comics, you know there's definitely horror potential at Marvel. In this team, we could have Moon Knight, who could get a fresh start, the characters seen in Werewolf by Night, so Jack Russell, Elsa Bloodstone, and Man-Thing. Why not Brother Voodoo, a kind of Bayou Doctor Strange from Haiti? And to that, we could add the Punisher, who could work really well outside street-level stories. Magic, with the arrival of the mutants, Nico Minoru, who we saw in the animated Spider-Man series, and why not Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, and already that's quite an impressive team. We're still missing a master of the mystic arts. Doctor Strange would be ideal, but I think he'll die in Secret Wars and won't return after that. Because if you remember, there were persistent rumors that a Strange Academy series was in production, and I think this future school of sorcerers will be named Strange Academy by Wong in honor of Steven, who would have given his life to save the multiverse. So there are several options to replace him. Either Wong joins this team as Sorcerer Supreme, but honestly, I'm not sure that's a good idea. We've seen enough of him. Or why not Wanda Maximoff fully mastering her magic, and I admit that would be cool. Or it's simply Clea, whom we saw in the post-credit scene of Doctor Strange 2 and who will definitely become more important in the future. Because let's be honest, you don't cast Charlize Theron just for a post-credit scene. Now, the Galactic arc. Up until now, the Galactic arc has been way too focused on very specific characters, and the great galactic empires of Marvel have been, let's be honest, mistreated. Often used as a narrative excuse just to move the main character's storylines forward. Captain Marvel literally blew up the Kree Empire like snapping a cracker. We're talking about one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy in the comics. The Skrulls. Same thing, it's not any better. But anyway, I'm not going to talk about Secret Invasion in this video, it'll just make me mad. As for the other alien races, they've appeared sporadically, mainly in Guardians of the Galaxy, but nothing that's really been developed. And that's something Marvel, they've appeared here and there, mostly in Guardians of the Galaxy, but it hasn't been structured. That's finally about to change. Because yes, my friends, the galactic potential of the Marvel Universe is definitely on par with Star Wars, and two characters are going to embody this renewal. The first one is Nova. Like others, his project has been postponed again and again for years now. And yet he's one of the fans' favorites. But rest assured, the executives at Marvel have confirmed that the project is indeed underway. And several insiders claim that Nova will be as central in the next MCU as Loki was in the Multiverse Saga. And for that, they're finally going to launch the Annihilation run, one of my favorite runs. I've been telling you about it for a few years now. For those of you who've been around the longest, it's kind of like Starship Troopers, but with superheroes. Annihilus is a villain who lives in the negative zone, a parallel dimension made of antimatter where he rules over an almost endless army of monstrous insects. And the events of Secret Wars could actually open a breach at the very edge of the universe that would give access to this famous negative zone. And all Annihilus wants is to conquer everything. So of course, leading his horde, he will endanger all the great galactic empires. In the comics, it all starts with a lightning attack on Xandar, the headquarters of the Nova Corps. It's a galactic police unit that shares the powers of the World Mind. And in the comics, they are completely destroyed by Annihilus's wave. All of them except one, Richard Rider, a human, the sole survivor of the Nova Corps, who will inherit all the power of the Unimind. A power, let me remind you, normally shared among thousands of Novas, and instead of hiding it, Richard, stubborn as he is, decides to set up a galactic defense to try to stop Annihilus's wave. And it's in this arc that we'll also introduce our Silver Surfer, Norrin Radd. So yes, some people complained when they learned that the Fantastic Four were going to introduce a female version of the Surfer, but that's actually to save the real Norrin Radd for later and avoid confusion. Because according to several reports, the Silver Surfer is going to play a major role in the future, and he's the one who will form the Annihilators, a team made up of the greatest cosmic heroes. And in the comics, this team includes Gladiator, the champion of the Shi'ar Empire, Ronan the Accuser, the champion of the Kree Empire, Beta Ray Bill, wielder of Stormbreaker, Quasar, who holds the cosmic bracelets, and of course the Silver Surfer. This Annihilation run is a kind of galactic war on a massive scale, and that's exactly where the Guardians of the Galaxy make their first appearance in the comics. So it's easy to imagine that the new Guardians would join them, especially since in the comics, Star-Lord clearly becomes Nova's best buddy. That would be absolutely awesome to give him a fresh start. This could be a chance for Adam Warlock and Phil Avell to fully display their powers. Aguya might even become the Skrull Empire's champion, replacing the Super Skrull. Forgot about that, didn't you? Anyway, it really gets me hyped and I can't wait to see it. The street level arc. We've discussed some wild topics, but let's get back to reality for a moment. Because the MCU is about heroes on Earth throwing punches at villains and political storylines that reveal our contradictions. And don't worry, Marvel isn't just going to dive into the fantastical, even though the X-Men are already going to cover that topic quite a bit. Heroes like Daredevil, his Defenders, and other Spider-Man characters will now truly be rooted in street-level storylines. Because with the arrival of all these new legendary characters, we no longer have to drag all our heroes from one corner of the universe to another. Spider-Man should continue to be one of the studio's main characters. There's so much to do with him, starting with his next movie, which could be street level or even multiversal. Honestly, I don't even know anymore. It changes every 2 days. But Spider-Man 4 should be a fresh start for the character with a more personal New York-style arc. With, I hope finally, the introduction of Oscorp. And speaking of New York, there's no reason to think the Wilson Fisk arc as Mayor of New York will end with Season 2 of Daredevil. In the comics, these events lead to the Devil's Reign run, where all the heroes of New York team up to take him down. On top of that, we can add the Champions. A team that will also become central. It won't replace the Avengers, but everything seems to indicate that new members will join the team as the phases go on, especially Hulkling, who will be sent to Earth following the events of Annihilus. He is a hybrid of the Kree and Skrull races and the prince who can reconcile these peoples. Less street level, but still political, or at least cultural, we're going to have the rebirth of Black Panther. This character is now far too important to be left aside, and Marvel has already been working for some time with Ryan Coogler on a Black Panther 3 film with Denzel Washington as the antagonist. We can even imagine that the cancellation of the video game happened because it focused too much on an older version of Black Panther and not on the new version that was envisioned. And as I mentioned in my last video, I can really see Black Panther taking on an important role in the Illuminati of Earth 616, bringing together the leaders of each hero team in secret to find solutions to planetary problems. Let's make Wakanda a stronghold, and I would really love for them to adapt the fact that T'Challa and Storm are a couple. That would be awesome. The rest of the MCU. Obviously, in everything I've presented to you, there are a lot of new things, but I want to make something clear. Nothing I've said came out of nowhere. Everything is based on official information, insider reports, or at the very least, serious rumors. Nothing was thrown out at random. What about the rest of the current MCU? We discussed the Avengers, Thunderbolts, and legendary heroes who could survive secret wars. I think these teams will continue to appear in different projects. Maybe some of them will even get their own movie. To successfully do a soft reboot, you must avoid repeating what's already been done and making it the focus again. Fans will still enjoy seeing familiar elements. In the comics, Tony Stark appears everywhere. As S.H.I.E.L.D. director, he keeps his rank and can intervene as needed. A bit like Captain America, who sometimes shows up just to put a stop to a situation. I think these heroes will have a similar role. We'll see them again, but only occasionally, and of course in new Avengers movies in a few years. Generally speaking, I think the MCU of tomorrow will be much more interconnected. Too often, we've wondered where the other heroes went, like in Captain America 4, where Sam fights a Red Hulk all by himself, or in Daredevil, when the Kingpin takes over New York but Spidey has disappeared. It would also be a way to do fan service, but positive fan service. Little surprises that make this universe really immersive. And above all, it's something Bob Iger genuinely wants. Make every movie an event for the fans. Finally, there's also the Fantastic Four. They definitely have a bright future ahead of them. But in the comics, they're so important that Reed Richards often gets involved in other characters' stories, so he could have a role at the crossroads of Paranormal and Galactic arcs. And honestly, that makes you think the Galactus threat might not be that far off. But let's go see their movie this summer first to form our own opinion. Well, what we can take away is that the future looks absolutely extraordinary. If you haven't seen my latest video about Marvel's strategy to save itself, it's right here, and I'll see you next Sunday at 5 PM for a new video. In the meantime, don't forget to stay curious. That's the secret to being happy. What?